My parents were married for nigh on 30 years, until my father could take no more. The voices, it appears. A life cut short, death by suicide. It's not been the same since Dad died.
Kalwinder Singh Dhindsa's father Mahinder died by suicide in 2006. Following the tragedy, the 40-year-old has written 2 books about the death of his dad, as well as a number of collections of poetry, including poems about mental health. And we spoke to him to hear about his story.
My father, Mahinder Singh Dhindsa, passed away on March the 1st, 2006, nearly 14 years ago, and he died by suicide. So ever since his death, I've been trying to come to terms with what happened, why he did it, and I've been trying to help people along the way in terms of the grieving and bereavement side of things in relation to help them get on with their lives, let's say.
I know you've written books as well. I mean, has that helped you sort of throughout that process?
Definitely. When my father first passed away, it was very difficult for me to engage with my people, my community, loved ones, friends.
Yeah.
Because at the time, although I had been affected by suicide not long before, 3 months previously, my father's brother had died by suicide, you see. It was difficult at the time just to engage with anyone because there's this stigma attached to the word suicide, and especially when you use the words commit suicide. It's one of those things that when people engage with you, either they don't know what to say or they're worried they're going to upset you, so they tend not to speak about what happened. And I found that very difficult because my father was a good man, and I would say that because he was my father, but I genuinely knew that because a lot of other people would have said the same about him. So I just felt it was very unfair that a good person who has died by suicide could be forgotten in this way. And because I had no one to talk to, and because this word commit suicide kept holding me back, because I didn't quite have the words to express, because commit relates in my mind back then and even now as a crime, criminality. But it was only when I stopped saying the word commit and went for the words died by suicide did things become easier for me to, well, I say talk about, but more write about. Because back then I began writing things down. And initially there were just a few notes here and there on my little PDA or a little piece of scrap paper. And they started off as bitter, very, thinking suicide was selfish initially. But obviously when you think like that, then you think, hold on, that must mean my dad's selfish as well. No, surely not. My dad was a good person. You can't say he was selfish. And if you then keep thinking he was selfish, you're never going to start keep talking about him because you're ashamed, embarrassed. So yeah, writing was brilliant because I was able to write down things, get things off my chest. And it was in a sense, I was writing questions for myself, getting them out of me, and then trying my way to come to terms with those questions and answering them. Sometimes the answers came straight away as soon as you started writing them down. It was easier to understand what you were going through. Sometimes the answers took a lot longer. But yeah, writing was brilliant. It was unbelievably helpful for me to help me to eventually come to terms with my father's death.
And you mentioned the stigma briefly then. I mean, there's huge levels of stigma facing mental health and suicide in the South Asian community particularly. Why do you believe the issue of mental health is something that we simply don't speak about?
Well, speaking as a Sikh, someone who was raised as a Sikh in the Punjabi community, in Punjabi culture, a lot of the basis of our faith works around this idea of Chardi Kala, positive mental attitude, high rising spirits, and that's brilliant. It's all good and well if you have a sane mind and you're able to accept that, and if you're able to live by that. But obviously, when somebody's mind is corrupted by a mental illness, they're going to have difficulties assimilating that, living by that. And sometimes, even if they try and they just cannot live that way of life, others looking at them, observing them, might think this person is not a real Sikh. They cannot live in the Sikh way. Therefore, it's probably best we don't integrate with them, we don't engage with them, we'll just leave them be. So sadly, these people who have been corrupted by mental illness just tend to be left to their own devices. Off they go to the Gurdwara, sit in the corner by themselves quietly, people looking on thinking, wow, they're very religious, they're in their own world, they're in their own mind, they must be really connected to their God, but really their mind could be like turning over with all the pains and struggles, and they've got no one to talk to. So what I'm saying there, yeah, Chadwick Glass are all great and well, but if your mind is corrupted by mental illness, you have to have something more than just your face. You need to go to the doctor, you need to engage with mental health therapists and GPs and so on. And, you know, those two things, faith and medicine, need to work together, because I'm sorry to say it, but sometimes religion alone is not going to take you out of this dark period in your life. So I think that's why many religions kind of have that aspect of taboo and stigma. I'm not knocking anyone's religion, but, you know, sometimes people don't like to hear the truth, especially when it comes to mental health. And God cannot just click his or her fingers and make everything right.